A new foe has appeared. Hello, and welcome to the Element Actual Spotlight featuring oxygen, the acid form. Oxygen is the 8th element in the periodic table of elements and is classified as a non-metal. It is part of group 16, which creates -2 ions. Its atomic mass is 16, which means that it normally has 8 protons, 8 neutrons, and 8 electrons, 6 being in its valence shell. Oxygen was discovered by Joseph Priestley and Carl Scheele in 1774 in England and Sweden, given the name oxygen from the Greek words oxy, which means acid, and genes, which means former. Let's look at some of oxygen's base stats. Oxygen's solubility in water is dependent on temperature. As you can see, 14.6 milligrams per liter dissolves at 0 degrees Celsius, and 7.6 milligrams per liter of oxygen dissolves at 20 degrees Celsius. That is almost half the solubility in water by only 20 degrees difference in temperature. Oxygen boils at -183 degrees Celsius and melts at -218.8 degrees Celsius. Oxygen is a poor conductor of electricity, has no luster, and is non-malleable. In fact, it is very brittle when it's in its solid form, if you could ever find it. Let's look at some of oxygen's strengths and weaknesses. Oxygen forms to create dioxygen at standard room temperature, which is a colorless, odorless, tasteless diatomic gas, formed as O2. Ozone, which is O3, makes up the ozone layer, which is very poisonous and deadly to living organisms. However, O3 is the exact size to absorb UV rays that it comes from the sun. If it wasn't for the ozone layer, multiple people, everyone, would have skin cancer and blindness. So ozone is both beneficial and harmful. Oxygen reacts highly with metals, creating rust and oxidizers. It can light things back on fire. It is inflammable though. Oxygen is also the product of important reactions like photosynthesis, rusting of iron, combustion. However, it is also part of those chemical compounds and reactions as well, such as water and glucose, carbon dioxide, you name it. Oxygen's unique perk is that it has the second highest electronegativity of all of reactive elements aside from fluorine. This makes it reactive to almost all elements except for noble gases. Here are some of the interactions that you can find with oxygen in gameplay. Because oxygen comprises most of the mass in water, it also comprises most of the mass of living organisms. All major classes of structural molecules in living organisms like proteins, carbohydrates, and fats have oxygen in them. Major inorganic compounds like animal shells, teeth, and bone also have oxygen in them. Oxygen is used in photosynthesis and cellular respiration by a majority of the living things on Earth. It forms compounds with almost every element. However, it is more reactive with metals than it is with other non-metals/metalloids. Diatomic oxygen gas takes up 20.8% of the volume of air. Now, as we were talking about before, ozone is just the right size to bounce most of the sun's UV radiation back into space and prevents it from reaching Earth's surface. High levels of UV radiation causes skin cancer and blindness. Oxygen is a part of water, which is essential to all characters in the life class. Let's look at some of oxygen's item interaction. Due to the massive hole in the ozone layer and global warming, oxygen has changed our thinking on ways to power technology and keep our planet safe. In the mid-1980s, scientists discovered that there was a hole in the ozone layer over the South Pole. It was being destroyed by something. Researchers found out that fluorine, bromine, and chlorine characters in the form of hydrochlorofluorocarbons, chlorofluorocarbons, and methylbromine were the cause of this hole. These chemicals were used in refrigerators, hairsprays, and fire extinguishers. Politicians and scientists joined together to substitute the chemicals and outlaw them. The ozone layer is now recovering quickly. Let's look at some locations where you can find oxygen. You can find it anywhere that you go on the map, except for space if you're a part of the astronaut class. You can also find it in balls of water, alcohol, hydrogen peroxide, antifreeze, polyester, chlorethane, and many other things. These are just a couple of examples. Let's look at some of oxygen's player interaction. So as you can see, things like photosynthesis and combustion use oxygen to create things like glucose, carbon dioxide, and water. Now, if you look at the beginner iron class characters, they all have this very white kind of color to them. However, after playing the game more and having more hours, you start to get that veteran rust look of the iron class. This is because the iron reacts with the oxygen to create iron oxide. Other metals also do this as well, including magnesium oxide, sodium oxide, and many other more. Water is a very essential part of all characters in the life class. So, if you want to be able to live and keep your character's health up, you have to be able to have water, which has two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. Oxygen, the acid form, coming 2.5 billion years ago.